Hey, this is Sandra coming to you direct from Hayward, California, the heart of the San Francisco Bay Area, where I was born and raised. Who I am in a nutshell. I am a first-generation Chicana in the U.S., also the first in my family to go to college. My parents are immigrants from Mexico. I have a bachelor's degree in Chicano Studies from UC Berkeley and my master's degree in counseling from Cal State Hayward. I have been a California community college counselor for the past 20 years. I provide academic, career, and personal counseling in one-on-one sessions, as well as in college success courses. In these Brown Bag podcasts, my intention is to share my experiences working with my community and my college students. You will meet some of my mentors and awesome colleagues who have motivated me to continue doing the work that I do.
Hello, my name is Monique Williams. I am currently an English instructor at Chabot College. I work with the Emoja program. I am the tri-chair of the Student Access, Success, and Equity Committee, and I am a member of the CCEPG. I was born and raised in Hayward, California, and I am a proud Chabot College graduate. I earned a BA from Mills and an MA from San Francisco State, but I never left Chabot. It's my home, and I have been a part of the institution in many different ways. I've been a student, an administrator, and now I'm a teacher. I have had the privilege of seeing the college through 3 different lenses. I joined the Brown Bag podcast because of the 2 women I get to be in conversation with, Sandra and Carmen. These women, with a lot of care, teach me more about how to best serve the Chabot College community. I hope listening to this podcast will give you the same opportunity for growth that each conversation with these women gives to me.
What's up, everyone? It's Carmen Johnston, aka Mrs. J, aka Queen Carmi, aka DJ Carm Brulee, here and ready to build knowledge with my 2 amazing co-hosts. I am a Black woman born and bred in the Bay Area. I am a proud Gen Xer, radiant English professor, and pop culture enthusiast. I have a bachelor's in liberal studies and master's in English creative writing, both from San Francisco State University. I've worn several hats at Chabot College, ranging from co-founding the Change It Now learning community to co-leading the Chabot Collaborative for Equity and Professional Growth. Mostly, though, I'm interested in transformation by holding space for difficult conversations that will ultimately move us all closer to a more equitable college and more just world.
Good morning, everybody. This is Sandra Janera, and what's new in my life is a new puppy. I have a new chocolate lab that joined our family, and she's exciting and she's requiring a lot, but my son and my husband are training her well, which is really nice. And what's good in my life is I'm in a new office here on campus, and so it feels really comfortable. It feels really good. I am the counselor coordinator for the EOPS program, interim. Lakeisha?
So my name is Lakeisha Stewart, and I am the coordinator for the Black Cultural Resource Center at Chabot College. And what is giving me life lately is my son. So I have a 17-year-old son. I have a 24-year-old daughter. She has had challenges with being a preemie and being a person living with disability. So she's always been my baby girl, even though she's just turned 24 this past Tuesday. So what is giving me life with my son? He was a typically healthy baby boy. No preemie issues. Typically developing kid. But he ran into a lot of challenges, and I'll say this, that ever since from preschool, he was just honor student, straight A's, always very academically, academics just came really easy for him. So when we went through the pandemic and the homeschooling and all that, the shelter in place, all that stuff, I just really noticed a decline in him in academics. And when we came out of shelter in place, he literally went into high school that year. So basically 9th grade was his first year back in person in school. And he did really well. I have to say his 9th grade year, but then 10th grade, it was literally like the light just shut off. Like he didn't do anything. He passed no classes. And when I say no classes, he passed no classes. So I really had to dive into what was going on. Come to find out, he had some bullying issues that were going on. I had several meetings with counselors and teachers and other parents and students. And so that led to, nothing happening on the side of the school except for, these kids just kind of got to figure it out. So as a parent, I just had to be proactive about the situation because I did not want him to fall behind, of which he already was, because he literally was looking at repeating the 10th grade, for 11th and 12th. So I pulled him out of in person and I got him on in person independent study. And immediately everything just changed. His attitude, his mental health and wellness, because I also had him seeing a counselor, at the time, over the summer. And so he was working with his counselor, he's working with mom and dad, and he's, on independent study. And now as a senior and as that 17, and he'll be 18 come March, excuse me, he's actually looking at graduating early now. So he's just like knocking those credits out, like nothing. And his attitude is so much better, and we have such a better connection because I was just, we spent so much time arguing and going back and forth, and it's like, when he was in person, and I just, point being, I just didn't know what was going on, like how he was really had being affected by his mental health. And he literally just came to me one morning at 4 in the morning and was like, "Mom, I can't do this anymore. I can't go to school." And it was really heartbreaking, that we had like a whole 2 hour session at 4 o'clock in the morning just crying, and I'm telling him, "I need you to be here." He literally said, "I don't want to be here." So, that was just really hard to hear as a parent. Excuse me, guys. So, just to see him, flip the script and to just be flourishing now. And just side note, what literally gave me life like last week is he was like growing up into such a man, like moving into that space. He's 17, he's gonna be an illegal adult soon. He's like giving me relationship advice. It was so cute. He's like, "Well, mom, if I were you, or what I think." And so I'm just like seeing him grow into this wonderful young man, and that he's always been such a great kid. And just to see the difference of, when he struggled so much at that time to now. So that's what's giving me life.
Oh, Lakeisha got us all crying early.
I didn't even
I
mean to
know,
dive
I'm
in that deep,
sorry.
but it just comes.
Yes, it does.
Congratulations to you and him, and good job for doing so much to support him and be his advocate. I mean, it really speaks to like a lot of what we're talking about today, that an environment can really change
Hmm.
how you feel about coming to the place that you spend so much time in. And kids spend a ton of time in school, and that environment can have a huge impact on their psychological stuff, which
Absolutely.
else. So thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing that. Patrick, you want to tell us what's giving you life?
How am I supposed to go after that? No, but yeah, thank you for sharing, Lakeisha. A little bit similar. I think it's maybe not so deep, but I think just sometimes I've been helping babysitting my nephew, so that's been great. He's turning two, like like in December, so that's been great. Just being able to just be there and assisting my brother a little bit, and also honestly, I love sports, so soccer or European football. So almost every weekend I get to go watch, and then with like strangers that at this point we're like friends, but with strangers, like it's one of those you'll see us like shouting, laughing, crying. And I remember like last week somebody just came for the first time and was like, what are your names? You all know each other. We're like, we don't know each other's names, but we've been sitting in the same spot for 2 years. Just watching the games and just kind of like, I don't know, just enjoying the time. So I think that's been kind of like giving me some life because I'm really into sports, and just having the time to be able to just do that, go to a place, watch a game, laugh with people.
Carmen, you want to tell us what's giving you life?
Hmm. Yeah. Well, it's just funny to hear, Patrick, that you're into sports because I know you're always sending out the little emails like, we're doing soccer games here. You can come watch it here. And so I didn't know that like you were really into sports. So that's fun to know. It's cool to share. Well, what's giving me life right now is my Change It Now team because we have two people that are hired like specifically to support our program. So we have Nikki, who is our counseling assistant that we share with Movement API. And then we just hired a part-time counselor coordinator, Joy Mara. And together, it's just, I don't even know how to describe how nice it is just to have people whose, only job is really to support the program. I mean, for 15 years, it's just been running off of faculty, doing our regular jobs and doing SIN on top of it. And we've done an exceptional job. And now we just get to take things to a whole other level. And I will tell you, we are having an event next Friday, our student leadership retreat. And basically, Nikki and Jeremiah are planning it. And I'm just like, wait, you're going to do that? You're coming up with an agenda? I don't even know how to like live. I'm like, what? Oh, I just come? That's all. So it's just been really, 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 really wonderful to have them. And I feel very grateful to Dee Molina and VP Krishner for helping us tap into some funds. And now we're going to be, working really closely with the Next Step program to support foster youth in sin, which I think is just such an amazing opportunity. And I'm really excited because it's just always nice to get to learn, to be in a learning space and to get to learn how to think about a specific population of students. So very energized by that. My sin team is giving me life. What about you, Monique?
I like it was trying to think of something. There, not that I don't have anything. I'm alive. So it's not that I have
So you can always start there.
I actually feel like I think it's hard to think of something because I feel like I have a lot of things, like which is great. Like I have so many things that I think I can be really joyful about right now, and that's wonderful. But I think maybe like the one that is like only mine is that like so I decided to take next semester off, and I like realized I'm gonna go out on load banking, and I realized that I have not stopped working since I was 13 years old. Like I've been working since I was 13 and I never have not worked. Like I've just always been working. And even like, summers off, I don't get like I usually teach in the summer. I don't take the summers off, right? And so like just that was weighing heavy on me. Like like I had a guilt connected to it. Like how can I not work, like and I should be teaching and like what am I doing and all this other stuff. And then I have the Emoja class, and I was like, okay, this can either make me feel like I'm going out like on a like, damn, I'm really a horrible teacher, or or then I really need to think about that over my break, or I'm doing all right. And I actually feel like I'm not bad at this. Like my class is awesome. The students have been great. They're like, like I feel like they think they're being supported through challenges. They're, like they're kind of like really showing up. And so it's kind of like I feel like this is the perfect way to start a break,
Mhm,
because
mhm,
like instead of starting a break as like, oh, I'm gonna go on break and then I'm gonna think about how I can never come back there. Right. I'm instead gonna go on break and think about like how can I continue to show up in this way, like or how can I improve on things, but also like not bash myself and feel like, okay, I am kind of good at this, like and so I think that's what's giving me life is the idea that I am kind of good at this, like that. Yeah. So today,
mhm,
I think I mean a lot of us talked about like this kind of joy that we find in like each other and in relationships, right? And I think that joy can be found in many places, but we spend a lot of time, all of us, at Chabot, right? Like a lot of our time is spent at Chabot. And a lot of what we do is really reliant on the relationships that we have with each other and with people at Chabot. And so, like while there's processes and procedures and things for everything, there's also like this kind of side of, like, do you really care? Do you know me? Like, how can I have a conversation with you? Like all of those real human things. I think it's kind of like the difference between thinking about qualitative and quantitative data, right? Like this shows us how we do that, right? And this shows us the ways in which we interact while we do that and what it feels like to do that, right? And so when we had talked to Virginia on the last episode, which was last semester, we talked about like the bureaucracy and kind of like all these things. And we talked about almost like this disconnect to a certain extent between classified and faculty around the bureaucracies of things, right? And then, Carmen and I and a bunch of other people have been working on this DIA work coming from the state, which is diversity, equity, inclusion, and access, right? Work across the state that's asking us to make sure that we are more equitable in our institution. And often that translates to us being more equitable towards students, right? That's the first place that our brain goes. But the state very clearly said in their plan that they also want us to think about how we are becoming more equitable between our colleagues with each other. The whole institution, like from all the way to at the district to people who are working in the colleges, right? And that sometimes gets overlooked. Patrick at Convocation really, really brought this out, right? When we were on the DIA panel, we're all talking about what DIA is. And Patrick said some things that resonated with the entire crowd about how we aren't in each other's spaces in an equitable way, right? And hopefully, Patrick, I'm summarizing this correctly, but you can correct me, right? But there's not that we do need to work on this, right? We do need to work on equity between one another. And so we just wanted to have a conversation between us and all of the college, right? About what does it mean? How do we get to that point? How are we not being equitable towards each other? Like, what are the barriers that we have between each other? What are some of the things that we've experienced, and how do we change that? Any of you guys want to speak on just, or Patrick, you want to correct me on anything from convocation?
No, not really. I think it was more so that I was thinking, and as well being obviously like a recent student and just like, I mean, for the most part, I had never heard like classified like as a student, right? Like what is a classified, what is a faculty? I was just like, about professors, right? Counselors, but to me, it's just everybody just, I would say, is a staff. And I think when being hired, I think that was still took me a little bit of like, okay, you are a classified professional. I was like, okay, what does that really mean? Right. And it's like, what, like, you don't even really get, at the very least, during my orientation, like, just, I guess, my meeting with HR, there wasn't much about like, here are the different types, right, of like, in terms of employees, but it was more focusing on like, what am I? What are the different structures? What are like some of the procedures that I can? And I think just later on, I just realizing like, oh, there's are really big differences. And I think especially if it started after, I think like a couple months before as a classified, couple months before we went into lockdown and I had to work remotely. Right. I think it was just like the different in terms of like, let's just say some of the professors that I knew in terms of like, how do you adjust being able to work remote and as well being able to do it just felt like there was a lot more restrictions or trying to ensure there was a lot more bureaucracies around like what classified can and cannot do. Um, and I think in those cases, it's just like there was a lot more figuring out, like, it just felt, can you really do your work? Right? Or are you just going to be just lazing around? Right? Like, it's just, and I don't know how much of the conversations were, for example, I don't think I was in a lot of conversation about, hey, what do you think you need to be able to do your work?
Mm,
Versus, I think the direction was more of like, here's
mm,
what we think you need to be able to do
mm.
your work. So I think even from there, that point, right, it's just, am I just here? So I think there was just those little things that I'm like, I just don't know if it's because of the time. At least at the beginning, I was like, stressful time. No one is knowing what's happening in this pandemic. It might like we all trying to figure it out. But I think it was just from there, just noticing a little bit after that. I was just like, we just have these, and it's okay. I feel like if there are differences in different roles, but when it becomes not clear barriers, I just feel like there were certain barriers that prohibit or allow certain, I guess, freedom in terms of what people can and cannot do. So
Mm, mhm.
yeah.
Hmm.
And when those things aren't communicated, and like the reasons why those barriers are put in place and stuff like that. And I don't think it's wrong to, but what happens is people usually fall back on what assumptions we think people are making, right? And those assumptions are those biases that about like who is upper class, who is lower class, blah, 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 all those things, right? Those assumptions do come with negative things, right? So we go, oh, are you doing it because you think we're lazy, right? Are you doing it because you think we aren't smart enough, right? Like like without clear communication and also without participation, like part of what you're saying is like, well, are you just telling me what to do? Or are you asking me? Like, and why aren't you asking me, right? Like what's the assumption that you're making about me that you don't feel like you can include me in the conversation with that, right? Those are the things we have to start looking at because it has consequences, maybe unintended consequences, but not looking at our bias about like who's in what position has consequences. Thank you
Mhm.
so much for sharing that, Patrick.
Yeah, it totally makes me think about that conversation we had about the power of us. Because I feel like when you are coming at somebody with like a top-down attitude, then there isn't a us, then it's us and them, right? Versus like what you were talking about was just us. I mean, the whole thing with COVID was that we were all in it together. But if you're telling somebody, this is what I think you need to do your job, and I don't know if you're even gonna be able to do it, and blah, blah, blah. And that's not really giving that energy that we're all in it together, when it should have been, hey, we're in this really hard situation, we still got to keep going. Like, what do you think you need so that we can keep, keep going, that you can keep doing your job. I think there's just a lot of fear, which definitely makes people want to control things. That's what it sounds like to me. There's a lot of issues around control.
Working closely with classified in special programs and in student services is approaching it as a team. Like, we are a team in this together. Like, we are here to serve our students. We're here, and we have different roles in how we're serving our students. And not everybody understands. Well, I guess senior leadership sometimes don't understand that we work as a team. It's not faculty versus classified, or it's not
Mhm.
students versus faculty. It's we all have our roles, and we're all working together towards helping our students achieve their goals so that we can all succeed, right? So that we can teach our classes, counsel our students, so that there's systems in place, and help our classified professionals to make sure they have the proper equipment to schedule events and to schedule appointments, and help our students move through the system in in a seamless way. But it doesn't happen quite as seamlessly across campus, I
Mhm.
think, is what I've seen. And
Mhm.
so, Lakeisha, having moved from student services to the academic services side, how has your experience been?
So yes, I wanted to first chime in and kind of piggyback on, your comments around it's not, faculty versus students or classified versus admin. We are a team and we're all, striving to serve our students, in the best way, in the best capacity that we can. So I just wanted to give a little bit of an example of how MSK has done a really great job of polarizing that. So in MSK, when we relaunched it, after, post pandemic, we decided to have a group of advisors for MSK, and that makes up of admin, classified professionals, and faculty members. And I think that us group of ladies as advisors, we have done, oh, when I tell you it just breathes and exemplifies sisterhood. So our administrators that are a part of my advisor team, and we do have one administrator who is, the face of MSK as far as the advisor. She's the, as far as, like paperwork wise, but she has basically made sure that all of us advisors know that we have equal share in leading, our students, our MSK ladies. We have like 7 advisors this semester, and like I said, it's like from each, class, on campus, quote unquote. And one of the ladies has an issue or is in crisis or has a question or anything, we've done a really great job as a group of making sure that any of us advisors, whether you're a counselor assistant or a coordinator or an administrator, VP, a dean, faculty members we have managers, all of, all spectrums of advisors, that any of us can jump in with the ladies and advise them, quote unquote, or to assist or give them that support. Like, no one in the group is seen as any more hierarchical as any other, advisor. And that also gives a great example to our students, our ladies that are participating in the group, and they really appreciate that. And they have spoken to that. And they're like, say, for instance, Dr. Forbes, who is our quote unquote lead, she's a VP on campus. And our ladies know that her voice is just as important, or my voice as a coordinator, or DJ's voice as a counselor assistant is just important in that group setting as Dr. Forbes, who's VP, on our campus. And we've just really created a really beautiful network of sisterhood and supporting each other. Dr. Coleman, she is amazing. Love, love, love her. She's so transparent. And
Yeah.
you almost forget she's a dean. You really do. Like, she's
Mhm.
like, she almost forgets she's a dean. She's just such a human being, you know? And she has the best hugs. I don't know if any of you guys have gotten one of her hugs, but she also has the best hugs. And that's another part of that her dynamic that makes her just human. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of speak to that quickly. That there's an example of how MSK has kind of destigmatized that idea of class system on campus, because within our network there is no class system, even within our students, their voices, like yesterday in our meeting we were like, wow, you guys are so wise, like you're wise beyond your years coming out of high school, like, wow, I didn't even think about that. So they're in turn even advising us. So, but to answer your question, Ms. Sandra, moving from student services over to academic services, my position, I feel, is still very student facing. So I'm still in the most part, I'm still kind of serving our students in the same capacity as I did on student services side and special programs. I'm still doing warm handoffs. I'm still helping students sign up for classes. I'm still, directing them in the right place where they need to get, their help or services, or, just sitting down and having a conversation with them, because that's another big part of my job. I have students that come to the BCRC every morning just to give me a hug, and I love it. There was a couple of students we had last semester that were out of state students. And they were like, man, you just remind me of my mom, and I miss my mom. They're living out of state, away from their family. And they're like, we just want to come by and give you a hug and grab a snack, and then they're on their way to class.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Creating
I
a
love that
space,
so
right?
much.
Yeah.
Yes, I do. Absolutely. We actually touched on this yesterday in our meeting, where one of our advisors said that, no matter who a person is on this campus, whether it's our college president or whether it's one of our M&O members, I treat everyone the same. I see everyone as human. And that really resonated with the ladies. It's like we were talking about, basically the question is, like when you walk into a room or when you walk into a space, how do you remind yourself of like how awesome or dope or great you are? So basically I've spoke to a point of like, sometimes when you go into these meetings and you're in meetings with people with with all these letters behind their name, and it can be very intimidating. And so myself, I hold a bachelor's degree and I'm very proud of that. But I walk into those spaces and I just have to tell myself, I remind myself of how dope I am, and I'm still on my journey. I'm definitely still on my journey. I'm not done yet. I do plan on getting, another degree if it's in me. But yeah, so I don't feel that not having all those letters behind my name is gonna like hinder me or in like doing my job, and especially in service to our students.
Matters.
Yeah.
And
So
do you think that your role in MSK, My Sister's Keeper group, has provided you with that, with that energy to be able to move seamlessly around campus because
yeah,
of the responsibility, like the equal responsibility or the equal access that you've had in your experience with MSK?
so they spoke to that in that meeting, and it's like, that's right. Whether you have a PhD or whether you have an associate's, we're all human and we're all here to serve our students, and we all have equal responsibility, equal access to the students, and equal opportunity, to serve them in the best capacity, that you can. Yeah, I just thought that was really great.
And that reminds me of Access to Success as a vision of the community college system too.
Mhm.
And so one of the questions that we had for you all was, what steps can we take at Chabot to have truly equitable relationships with each other?
Mhm.
And what needs to happen? But I think you gave a perfect example, Lakeisha, of a step that we all can take is participating in a club,
Mhm.
participating as an advisor, participating in the different events that happen across campus, and seeing each other, right?
Mhm.
And so that when you step into that room, you see each other, you recognize each other, you acknowledge each other, no matter what name, how many letters you have behind your name or not, right?
Mhm.
Because many of those times it's going to be our students. And once we create a space where we feel comfortable in, where we know we're dope and we know that we're sharing the experience equally, with everybody, that we're sharing our dopeness equally with everybody. I think that that is what creates the space for us to be able to walk seamlessly across campus.
Mhm.
And I think once I experienced that myself, it was like, okay, this is my home. This is my space. I can be dope here. Whether it's in a suit or in my sweatshirt today, right? And when students see me, that I see them as well, right? That I recognize them. And so thank you for sharing that.
Yes, you're welcome. And perfectly said. Perfectly said.
I think with
Yeah.
what Keisha said though, it seems like that that space is created by MSK, that's often created in learning communities, right, is very intentionally created, right? Like this thing of, like not shutting anyone out, making sure we kind of flatten the hierarchy to be able to come together as a group, right? And to discuss things as a group and work as a community. I'm not sure that that space is something that everyone else can access, right? People who aren't necessarily a part. Part of one of the questions that got a lot of claps at convocation that Patrick asked was like, he's like, can I go to this administrative meeting? Can I go to this faculty meeting? Can I go sit in on this? Right? Like, can I be in that space? Because it kind of feels like I'm like we're in these silos of like, here's where you're supposed to be, here's where you're. So like, how do we create as a college and not only put like, we can put it on ourselves to a certain extent, like, hey, like start working on your mentality about these issues. But like, how do we ask the college to create this? Right? How do we ask the college to create a space that lets us own our dopeness,
I
right?
think the shared governance model is trying to go for that. I mean, you have the tri-chairs, right? Where the tri-chairs are an admin, a faculty member, and a classified professional. And then, it seems I haven't been on shared governance in a while because of all the other projects that I do, but it seems like, that's supposed to be maybe a spot for this to happen. Now, if it does, and if it doesn't, I don't know. I think it would probably depend on the leadership and the culture that's built within those committees. I think it's also hard because those committees don't really have a lot of power since they mostly just make recommendations. So I think that piece in itself doesn't go with the power of us, right? It's like you're doing a lot of labor, but you don't really have a voice to some extent, right? But it seems like that's a model that's trying for that. And I also just wanted to kind of pivot back to something that Sandra brought up, which was this idea of roles, right? That like we all have a role to play at the college. And I feel like that's been something I've been saying a lot, is that like we have these roles and like one isn't better than the other, right? And I think, you know, as this, maybe people don't believe it, but as this society begins to collapse because capitalism can't work forever, that it would be so great for us to have more experiences being in each other's roles. I mean, there's some models out there where like the way kind of employment would work was that you cycle through. Like, what if, I was a teacher for a semester, but then the next semester I was actually doing the landscaping on campus, or I was the president for a semester, or, like that you would cycle through these roles so that everybody has an opportunity to be in that. I think, that's a totally different way of thinking, but it definitely interrupts hierarchical thinking and hierarchical ways of being that really does put us all on an even playing field. And one question that I was curious about was just kind of the role of education in this, because I heard you, Lakeisha, say like you have a BA and you're thinking about going back. And I know, I have a master's degree and so many of my colleagues are getting their doctorate right now. And I don't want to go back to school. I don't really want to. But it also feels like you're kind of, and I think for us as faculty, like the only way to really grow in your career in a certain way is to become an administrator. Like there really isn't any other way to grow and like I feel like I take on a lot of leadership on campus, but there's not, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. It just seems like, what does that even mean? What does that do? Like, what, I don't know. So I wish there were just like more pathways for us all here that didn't always involve having to go back and get another degree. And I wondered if, other folks just felt that pressure to kind of move up and get more status or just to even go back to school to like show that you're, have something to offer. Other people thinking about going back to school or not?
I'm definitely not thinking of going back to school. I think my master's degree is fine. It's like, where is that recognition for the leadership and the role, the roles that we
Yes.
are playing, in this education? I've recently come into that crux of, am I doing enough? Am I getting enough of the experience or the recognition, and having to move spaces within spaces so that I can get the experience needed to be able to get the recognition
Mm.
of that. I don't know, like I think it's difficult. I think that's where I'm having like do I really have to? and or that guilt of like I'm comfortable of where I'm at and I'm doing good where I'm doing good enough, where I'm at, but I know I can do better also at the same time for a greater good of the campus and not just for a segment of the population on campus. And so um and where is that in why do I have to do this other stuff to move up in that hierarchy, or to be recognized in that hierarchy? And so I don't know. I think that's still a lot, I'm still thinking a lot about of, where does that fit in with me and what my next steps are. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. One day I'm like, "Oh, no, 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 I'm not gonna move up in higher into administration." And then the next day I'm just like, "But I would be so good at it. Like, I have so many ideas, but
Yeah.
why hasn't anybody thought of this or done that?" Like,
Yeah.
and so, and I don't know if it's about the pressures of the upward mobility, the pressures on myself of challenging myself to say, "Well, why can't it be you? Why am I waiting on somebody else?"
Mm.
So, I don't know. That's just been my recent experience
Mhm.
of the outside pressures versus the internal pressures on myself
Well, I
in
have
the
one other
educational
example
system.
of what you just spoke to, Sandra. Look, you're giving me all these nuggets. I keep having an opportunity to piggyback off of you, and giving
Yes,
an
yes.
example, I should
what you're
say.
speaking
So
to.
recently, I was voted the new BEA president, and
Right.
I had to really appreciate and really thank the faculty member that changed the script that the BEA had been running on. The BEA had formerly always been in leadership in the president's position and was always in either a administrator or a faculty member, and that was pretty much it. It was usually an admin or a faculty member, and it was like when that admin or that faculty member was like, okay, tag you're it to the next person. And it was always the next faculty member or counselor or administrator. And so our past BEA president, Brian Oxberger, or I should say Dr. Brian Oxberger now, yes, he just
Speaking of
got his
education,
doctorate. He just
right?
obtained his doctoral degree, and he said, "You know what? I want to open up a voting, system for our new, president, and it doesn't have to be a tag you're it, or a being voluntold, by the last, president to the new." And so I was really appreciative of that. And so when the nominations went out, myself and a couple of other people were nominated, and then when the vote happened, I was voted in as the new president, of which I did really want it, and I had for a couple of years, to be honest. But I just knew that it's always been someone with those letters behind their name, and so he was just like, it doesn't have to be that. And so I was just very, very appreciative to him to open that door to a classified professional to be able to hold that presidency within the BEA. And I think that that's a model that campus wide can go forward. I'm sure that there are groups and spaces where it's already happening, where you have classified professionals in leadership, particularly with the BEA. And turning the page with that, I was really grateful for that because I was like, I have so many ideas. I have so much energy around, supporting our students, and coming from a Chabot alum myself and being a part of special programs and all of that is just like I just felt that it's like I could have a really one touch with the process.
Congratulations, Lakeisha, on
Thank
the
you.
new president of the Black Education Association
Thank
committee
you.
on at Chabot, and we have many affinity groups on campus
Hmm.
that have this opportunity that where all of our staff, faculty, and administrators have that opportunity to step into leadership roles. And thank you for reminding us of
Yeah, absolutely. I
that
mean, to be honest, I was
example.
really terrified. Like, oh my gosh, can I do this? Like what you just said, like, ooh, can I? Do I really want to? Am I going to live up to, these huge shoes that, that have been left for you to fill, as I'm moving, forward with getting more or higher positions on campus, going from, and Miss Williams can attest to this, going from literally a student assistant on this campus about 6 years ago to now being a coordinator and president of BEA. I was a member of BEA as a student, and then as a staff member. And so it's just, the upward movement. I'm appreciative for, I'm honored, I'm grateful, but I also know that I have put in the work. I put in the hard work. So
That's right.
there's
Yeah, you've
where
earned it.
you have to remind yourself of your
Mhm.
dopeness.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. It's such a balance, right, between like the hard work that you do and then like the mentors and support you have
Hmm.
along the
Hmm.
way and just not, yeah, not forgetting the hard work that you did. I think sometimes we
Absolutely.
can be so overly gratuitous to the people that helped us and forget that like,
Absolutely.
it was a two, we worked together to make it happen.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It's
It's
That
good,
like
you
it
have
good
was
to
me
a
too.
acknowledge
that you have
that.
a
Yeah.
support team around you as well, and
Mhm.
you walking across campus to be able to get a hug and know who you could get a hug from, or be reminded of your dopeness, or just be reminded that it's just a meeting, that you don't
Mhm.
have to be terrified about that
Mhm.
meeting that you're going to be leading,
Mhm.
um, is very important.
Patrick, you had
Yeah.
unmuted at the beginning. Did you want to add something about this pressure of feeling um, like that you always have to move up in the institution, or that there's some next move that you have to make,
Right.
even up, right?
Right. Like I think in that case that's true. And in terms of yeah, right. So I think it's like the pressure to move up, but I always wonder as well, like, is there a reason, right? In terms of that case. Because if there is like it just feels like, oh, we're just supposed to move up. And I think like, and that's another question, right? Something to wonder to me is like, if you're moving up for the sake of like, oh, I will get paid more, then in that case, it's like that means it's an issue in itself, right? In terms of the wages we're getting. If we're saying that the wages we're getting are not enough, right? That it's like we start here, but you need to keep on moving versus, for example, for me, going back to school, right? Like if I went, would be, I'm thinking maybe of doing, if I wanted to be involved in debate at a college level as a coach, that means masters in communication, probably, right? So I think in that case, it's like, there's a reason I like that. So I think be able to like teach, right, could be like something in the back of my head that I'm thinking, and I want to do it at a college level. So that's an incentive to do it versus, because otherwise I love interacting with students. I think for me, moving up is something I'm not necessarily sure because I think the higher you move up, the less interactions and genuine connections you have with the students, right?
Yeah.
Like I mean, I loved Abby and at this case as well, Dr. A, right, Ryan, Dr. V, but it's like in this case, as and the amazing work that they do behind the scene, right? So I think like that's fair, like any deans that they do, but how often do they get to meet the students, right? To be able to share the stories. And I think like I love just being able to be there and being one of their first point of contact and be with them throughout their journey. So it's something like, unless you told me like there's other positions moving up that will still keep it similar, that's
Mhm.
not really something I want to do personally,
Yeah.
because it's just, I've realized that I love working with them. And I think even in my previous job outside of Chabot, I was just like, I realized I love really working and being able to be one of the first points of contact that the students have. So I think, yeah, that in itself can be, and sometimes, like you say, it's just like we're supposed to move, right? So that's why we have the steps, right? The steps just kind of keep on going. But even in the steps, I just like, oh, I guess I know how much I'll be making next year. um, but that's about it. And maybe what additional benefits. So I think those can be as well. Yeah, those as well. I think in that case, a little bit pressures that we have. And I think that's just may have been there for particular reasons, but I think we don't know, like, I don't think there's enough conversation about why procedures were put in place and how are they still relevant. And I think having those conversations and maybe yeah. And I think it's like, you never know, maybe like what something may have been intended in the past, its intention, and I think it's the accountability portion of like, are we really holding each other accountable? And yeah, I think another way, if we're talking about like how do we build, is like, do we promote having, besides let's just say division meetings, but do we promote just in college wide? Do we make time to meet with each other? Besides, like I can't even really say it will be flex day because I think flex day, yes, we're able to share, but it's just like it feels like we have so many like workshop sessions, meetings to go to that it's so packed that show maybe at the end of the day we have whatever social we're doing. Lunch is even busy because everybody just goes back to their offices. It's like, oh, a little bit of time for me maybe to catch up on emails, maybe send this out. It's not like, so I think we don't. And I mean, for example, one thing I loved, like one of the maybe last year's Flex Day, there was a men's session. But even then, when it's like one of the first few times, I'm like, I've met them individually, so faculty, administrators, what classified. but we've never had like that was the first time I actually got to see other men working on campus and us to be able to just come, just connect, interact, maybe share a little bit about just like, hey, what's been happening with us, right? Like I just that to me was really something that just as well kind of like wondering why don't we do this often, right? Like it's just there's not a lot of like so I think maybe something will be just like how do we promote college wildlife, like just even like making time and efforts for those to just like okay let's just meet and maybe for yeah besides just flex day, and even on flex day, right, it's dependent on somebody having the time and energy to propose a session and being able to do that, right? So
I love how you said, like, in part of what you said, is it about wages? Well, then maybe we need to talk about wages. Right? Because, like, even wages were set at a certain time with a certain idea, with a certain job description, right? And so these things, of course, are constantly revisited by unions and stuff like that. But until we actually think about bias, right, and how those biases influence and stick to wages, and we're always going to have this idea because when we talk about mobility, really upward mobility means more money, right? That's what we're talking about. It's more money.
Exactly.
But then it gets conflated with the idea that upward mobility also means like more status or more recognition or more like a superiority, right? And I think like with me personally, like I've always been flattered or felt complimented when somebody says like, "Hey, like have you ever considered this role because I think you'd be really good at it." But when there are also times when I hear an air of like, "Why are you still in that role? Because you could be in this role, right?" And that means like you could be in this higher role, right? Which means you're making assumptions about the role that I'm currently in, and which are insulting, right? Right? Like and so I think that like this that's a very American idea to think of like the more money you make means the more status or more importance you have. And so you could be this important. It's like, but I am that important. Like in my mind, I'm just as important, right? Like, and you are just as important. And like what Scott Hill just was saying, everybody makes this campus. Like everybody has that role that they play that is so important. If we walked around and saw a bunch of dead trees, we'd all be upset. M&O is super important, right? And so like this like idea that like you're stuck in a role rather than you want to be in that role because you love being with students, because you love blah, blah, blah. And that like you need to, because you have whatever potential that you need to get out of that role, right? And that idea, like, I think there's good intention behind telling people that you have access to all kinds of things. But the rhetoric of thinking that means it's more or better, right? That needs to be examined, like yeah, you can have access to everything, right? You can do this job, or you could do that job, or you could do that job. None of them are better than any other job,
Right,
right? They're
exactly.
just different. Like it's just
Exactly.
different, right?
It's just different. It's just a different role. You're just playing a different role. And I think just kind of, what Sandra was saying earlier about like recognition and then Lakeisha about the dopeness. I think that's all we want, is for people to recognize that we're dope and treat us with respect. I mean, I think it's just, we all are doing dope things on campus. We all are working really hard. Just treat us with respect.
Mhm.
And for me, it gets to some of those things that we were talking about earlier, some of the bureaucracies where, oh, now you have to like get your events approved. Now you have to do all this stuff to get money to go to a conference. With some, like, like you're doing something wrong, you need to be managed. It's very parental, you know? But everyone in on the Zoom right now is doing dope stuff, is very responsible, is committed to students, committed to college. So don't treat me like, I mean, I have a child. I know what it is to treat somebody like they need to be checked on and checked in and, all that kind of stuff. That's not who I am. And all of our work shows that. So I think that's the piece is like, respect me as a professional, that I'm in this with you. I want the best for our students. I'm not trying to get over when I go to a conference. I'm not trying to disrespect anybody by having this event, you know? Treat me with respect.
But to do that, biases need to be checked,
It
right?
needs to be checked.
Yeah,
between
it
each other.
really does.
And
Yeah.
that's the important thing. Like, we're constantly asking for bias to be checked for the students, right? Which is important. We should be, but we need to check bias between each other. We really do. And we need to say, like, are we doing this thing because there's a bias that's leading us into it, right? Or are we doing it for a good reason, right? And articulate that.
Yeah,
So I
totally.
think that that's a really good way to go into our recommendations. So this is usually how we end the podcast, is by giving a recommendation. The recommendation can be about what we talked about. You know, like you could come up with a recommendation for the college that has to do with our topic, or it could be completely off topic. It could be a movie, a book, whatever, right? So just a recommendation for anybody listening who has one.
I think stepping out and being able to attend the president's council meeting when they send the invite, right? And taking that was like, okay, they want to see my dopeness. Let me step in and share my dopeness with the president's council, or whichever, committees sending, being open to that, and then recognizing each other's dopeness, I think, is a recommendation as
Yeah, I think maybe even before the college, yeah, I think checking even our own biases, because I think even something for me, because even amongst classified, right, it's like depending, like even MNO, right, has even less opportunities than I do to be able to attend.
Mm.
Um, so I think like, I don't know, maybe a step would be making that effort to just, you don't even have to go out far off your building, right? Like just say like, okay, do I have, if you're faculty or non-faculty member in this hallway, that I can just go and say hi,
Mm.
or maybe learn their name. Like for me, it's just I try to make an effort to learn whichever building I get put into. Whoever is cleaning, like whoever is like MNO on that floor, I'm like, hey, that's me. I'm sorry for all the mess I caused. With the students, right? But at least learning their names, right? And saying maybe just saying hi to them every single time by using their name, right? So it's just somebody that you're going to see or get to see walk by every week, if not every day. So why not maybe take that extra effort of like, oh, let me say hi. Oh, maybe we have a little bit extra. We have this event and sharing those, right? So maybe as well, learning a little bit about them. So I think maybe just yeah, so that's what I'll say. Maybe just taking that step of, which sometimes can be a little bit uncomfortable because we get used to just having just in certain ways. So I think, yeah, that's what I was.
So I would say just simply see each other. So I think that kind of voices to our whole conversation that we've just had. And we kind of like voice this across campus all the time with making sure that our students feel seen. So I think that if we can just extend that to each other as colleagues, to just see each other and the dope things that we're doing on campus, see each other in whatever position that you're in and what, work that you're doing, no matter, what how many letters you have behind your name, as we said before, just simply seeing each other for what we're doing and acknowledging that. So I would say see each other.
Well, I will definitely add a recommendation that is not related to anything that we've talked about, because my jam is TV shows. So I will recommend a show called Heartstopper on Netflix. Now, if you are somebody that likes candy and you like cocoa, chocolates, and licorice, and all things sweet, you should watch this show because it is just the sweetest thing you've ever seen in your life. It's an all LGBTQ cast. It's teens coming of age, and it kind of centers around these two boys that fall in love. And oh my God, it is it's just so sweet. It is just so sweet. If you need like a pick me up and you want to see something hopeful and that'll just warm your heart. There's like 3 seasons. This is the third season. I just finished it the other day, and I don't know, it made me cry at the end because it's just, oh my God, it's just your heart is just overflowing with sweet, sweet, sweetness. I highly recommend. It's called Heartstoppers. Heartstopper on Netflix, and it's British, so it's got that little British thing going on.
Now I gotta look, because I'm rewatching shows that I've already watched because I'm out of shows. So like I've been watching Superstore, like,
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah. It's not this story. It's a
like,
teen show. It's not like it's got depth to it, but it's not it's just sweet. And so I just don't want you to have like some expectations that it's just very,
All I need
very,
now.
very sweet. Yeah,
I
very
don't like
sweet.
candy
Yeah.
at this October. I just
Yeah,
need.
it's perfect for that.
I think my recommendation would be that if you can, like, and I think that like you can apply it to what we're talking about now. You cannot, right? But if you can, have a day where you don't plan anything and nobody plans anything for you. Like, you don't plan anything to do. There's nothing on your list. There's no box to check. There's no dishes that you got to get to. There's no blah, blah, or whatever email. Like, you actually give yourself a day where there's nothing to do. Like, you have nothing on your plate. And then when somebody says, like, oh, you have nothing to do today, you say, don't tell me something that I need to do or that I can't do. Right? Like, you just like close that off and let it be a day that you have nothing to do. Right. I think that like in those days, so much comes from them, but we get so few. Like, I mean, you really, especially now, there's so much noise in the world. You have to be so intentional about that. And so I think doing that, give yourself a day that there's just nothing to do if you can. It's almost, I have a child, so it's almost impossible, but I can at
Very
least not
difficult.
plan it. Right? I can at
Very
least plan
difficult.
it. Stuff will happen. You'll do stuff, right? Like, you'll do stuff, but you didn't plan it, and that's fine, right? Yeah. So I'd like to thank you guys all so much for being here, especially Lakeisha and Patrick. Really, really appreciate your insights and your willingness to share. And hopefully, what you said, Lakeisha, will become, especially from MSK, sharing that model and having it become like a campus-wide thing would be a wonderful, wonderful thing.
Yes. Everybody have a good day.
Thank you, ladies, for
Welcome.
having us on. Much, much appreciated. Conversation
Yeah, it's so
conversation
good to be
was dope.
together. So
Just
good.
like you.
Yes, dope. That girl's dope. You
Yeah,
guys don't know nothing about
thank
that,
you.
so
If I keep telling the people, then maybe they'll believe it.
yeah.
Hey.
We'll see you later.